Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 313. Today we're going to talk about Cypher. And Cypher comes in this little bag. It is a game from AEG. It comes in kind of like the love letter bag. It's a micro game, plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 15 or 20 minutes to play a game. It is a small deck of cards. Players will be drafting cards and passing cards around and trying to basically play cards in front of them that have the biggest number on them. And the number in this case is called the influence. And you're sort of like these hacker guys manipulating this sort of hierarchy of a class. So there's upper class, middle class, and lower class folks. So the rich folks are worth more influence, but they're a little bit more easily targetable. So you don't want to just lay them out and then obviously have these big beefy targets for somebody to take down or steal from you. To start the game off, you're going to shuffle the deck of cards. You're going to add one card to the display. Now the display is not the discard pile. Any cards that you discard actually go back underneath the bottom of the deck. Depending on the number of players, you're going to deal the cards out to the players a little bit differently. What you see here is the setup for a 3-player game. Now, the start player, you can see at the bottom, is going to have 3 cards. The next player to their left will have 2 cards, and the player to the start player's right is going to have 1 card. Now, on a turn, the current player is going to play 1 card and then draw 1 card. So now they'll be back at 3 cards. After they've drawn a card, they're going to pass 1 card to the player on their right and 1 card to the player on their left. This will put them back down to 1 card usually. If they aren't down to 1 card, they have to discard any excess cards back to the bottom of the deck. Now, players at most can have 3 cards in front of them. If they have to play a 4th card, they've got to discard one of the cards in front of them. Now, that's pretty much the entire game. You play a card, you draw a card, then you pass cards left and right, and then you make sure that you're back down to 1 card. The next player goes, does the same thing, and keeps going around and around and around. Now the game's going to end in one of 2 ways. The first way, which I've never seen happen, we actually got close once, I think it's possible, but it's unlikely, is that you actually run out of the cards in the deck. There are some other card abilities and things that will let you draw extra cards and also remove cards out of the game completely, so it is possible. The other way that the game will end, and this is going to happen all the time, is when players play a Cipher Anomaly. As soon as a player plays a Cipher Anomaly card, that's going to trigger the end of the game. Everybody gets 1 final turn, including the player who played it. And then we total up everybody's influence, which you can see in the upper left-hand side of the card, and whoever has the highest influence is the winner. So let's go over each of the different cards in the game. I'll kind of explain a little bit of the strategy and how they work a little bit. So the first card that we see here, of course, is the Cipher Anomaly. As I already said, it ends the game. Now when you play it, you can draw a card, and then you can either add that card to your play area or you can discard it. So obviously you don't want to play the Cipher Anomaly because it's a 0, but it does allow you to hopefully replace it with something that you randomly draw. So you want to be in pretty good shape when you play the Cipher Anomaly, kind of deduce what's been played, what might be in the discard pile, and so on. The next one we have is the Fixer, and this says when played, draw 1 card and then add 1 card from your hand to your play area, so you can kind of double up the play there. You get a little bit of a draw and then an extra play. Next is the Extractor. This says when played, draw 3 cards, then choose 1 card from your hand and remove it from the game permanently face down. So this is one of the cards I was talking about earlier. You can actually remove a card out of the game. And this is pretty interesting because you know what card is going to be removed. So as you play the game a few more times, you're going to know which is some of the stronger cards and some of the, the big kill cards that are going to knock somebody out. Next here we have the Hacker. This says while in play, you may draw a card from the bottom of the deck when you are drawing cards. Now this can be actually a little bit tricky to use, but it works nicely in some combinations with some of the other cards that let you draw extra cards. And you can do some really cool manipulation with this character. And finally we have our last lower class card. You can see these kind of have like a gray border. This is the Bodyguard. He says, while in play, you may discard Bodyguard to ignore other players' card effects. So anything else that might target one of your bigger heavy hitter cards, you can sacrifice the Bodyguard to replace that effect. Now we have our first middle class card, and this is the Data Runner. He says, while in play, ignore the effect of other players' Technomancers. So let's look at the Technomancer. He says, when played, all other players must discard all upper class cards from their player area. So the Technomancer is huge. If you got some of your big heavy influence characters, the Technomancer is just going to wipe them right out. Next we have the Syndicate Chief, and he says, while in play, if Syndicate Chief is in a play area with lower class cards, its value is increased by 3 to a maximum of 6. So obviously you want to play him with a bunch of the other gray lower class cards. Now we have our last middle class card, and that's the Archivist. When played, add coder from another player's play area or display to your play area. And the coder is our first upper class card. And the coder says, while in play, you may draw 2 more cards when you are drawing cards. So at the end of the round, when you go to draw cards, you can draw extra cards. And this actually works good with the hacker, where you can draw cards from the bottom of the deck. So you can do some manipulation there with the coder, and it's a good, decent influence value. Next upper class card is the Android. It's worth a lot of influence, but it has no effect. Next card is the Executive, and when you play the Executive, you can switch positions with the Corporate Overseer. Which brings us to the next card, which is the Corp Overseer. And you can see this is worth 9 influence. When you play the Corp Overseer, you must discard all lower class cards from your play area. He doesn't play nice with the lower class cards. He's a big jerk. So there's a little bit of a trade-off. And it really kind of forces you to play him early in some ways. But that makes him a big target for things like the Technomancer and stuff like that. The last card that we have is the Aristocrat, and she doesn't like middle class people. When played, discard all middle class cards from your play area. And while in play, if you play a middle class card, you must discard the Aristocrat. So this is a game that's going to take you a few plays to really get into. You need to sort of see the timing of the game, how it's going to work for your group. But then it becomes very interesting because it's a sort of a waiting game, waiting to the game gets to a point where you think you've got it locked in, and then committing that Cipher Anomaly to to get what you want. Now the interesting thing is when you play the Cipher Anomaly, like say with the hacker, then maybe you know what's at the bottom of the deck, or you have a good idea that somebody tried to stuff away a big hitter card underneath there, and you try to take it out. So it's very, very interesting game, and it's cool because a lot of these micro games, at least recently, have been focused on deduction and stuff like that. So this has a deductive element, but it also has this very interesting, card drafting element where all the cards that you have are pretty good. You've got the Bodyguard, which will protect you. You've got the Archivist. You've got the Hacker. You got the big point cards and all that stuff. And you don't really want to give those cards to anybody on your turn, but you have to do that. So it's also a matter of giving somebody a card and knowing that what they have at their disposal, or making them kind of trying to double think them into what maybe your plans will be. So it is a game that's kind of a slow burn. It's not very complex or at all or difficult strategically, but it has a sort of a slow burn to it. Where you really have to play this 3 or 4 times to really get the hang of it and work up a nice meta game for your group. And the rules do have, I should say, a sort of a tournament thing where you play like best of 4, best of 7 or whatever. I would recommend playing it that way because the game it does play pretty quickly, about 15 minutes per session, sometimes quicker though, honestly. But once you get going, the game will pick up pace, and I definitely recommend it. It's very unique. It sits in a unique spot in this whole micro game world where it's sort of a micro drafting game. Okay, thanks.